The smell of fresh concrete usually means good money. But when I saw sandy loam soil on Brenda's $300 heels, the exact mineral composition from my richest client's property, I knew. The November air bit through my Carhartt jacket as I pulled into our driveway, the familiar crunch of gravel under my work truck's tires marking the end of another long day. Red clay caked the wheel wells and splattered up the sides, testament to the drainage field installation I'd finished out on County Road 47. I sat for a moment in the cab, letting the engine tick as it cooled, watching the warm yellow light spill from our kitchen window. Inside, the house felt unusually quiet. Emma's backpack sat by the stairs. She'd be upstairs doing algebra homework, probably struggling with those word problems again. The distant beeping of Lucas's video game drifted from the living room, punctuated by his occasional frustrated sighs. Little Sophia must be napping. At 7, she still crashed hard after school. Brenda's designer purse sat by the front door, that expensive Italian leather gleaming under the hallway light. Coach, I think. Or maybe it was the other one. Prada. They all looked the same to me, just different ways to spend money we didn't really have. "How was shopping?" I called out, heading to the kitchen sink to scrub the clay from my hands. The industrial soap burned against the small cuts and scrapes that came with the territory. "Fine," came her distant reply from somewhere deeper in the house. Her voice carried that flat tone I'd been hearing more often lately. I worked the orange pumice soap between my fingers, watching the red clay swirl down the drain. 15 years of marriage, and our conversations had been reduced to these brief exchanges, weather reports between strangers. At dinner, Brenda picked at her salad while scrolling through her phone, the blue light casting shadows across her face. The kids ate in relative silence, Emma occasionally glancing up from her plate with that worried expression she'd been wearing more often. Lucas focused on cutting his meatloaf into perfect squares the way he always did. "The Hendersons bought another vacation home," Brenda announced suddenly, turning her phone screen toward me. A Facebook post showed a sprawling lakefront property with a boat dock and manicured lawn. "Lake Tahoe, can you imagine?" I glanced at the image, then back to my plate. "Must be nice. Must be nice to have clean money," she added, her eyes flicking pointedly to my fingernails. "I'd scrub them raw, but you can never get all the soil out of the creases. Goes with the job." Emma shifted uncomfortably in her chair. At 14, she was old enough to feel the tension that seemed to fill our dining room like smoke. "Septic work pays the bills," I said quietly, cutting another piece of meatloaf. The silence stretched between us, filled only with the clink of silverware against plates and the distant hum of the refrigerator. Brenda set down her fork with a small sigh. "I just think, don't you ever want more? For the kids?" I looked across the table at Emma, who was studying her green beans with intense concentration, and Lucas, who had stopped eating entirely. "I think the kids are doing just fine." The conversation died there, like most of our conversations did these days. Later that evening, after helping Lucas with his math homework and reading Sophia a bedtime story, I noticed Brenda's shoes by the front door. The Louboutins, those red-soled heels that cost more than I made in a week. She'd bought them last month, and I'd felt my stomach drop when I saw the credit card statement. Something caught my eye as I bent to straighten them. Sandy particles clung to the distinctive red soles, a light tan color that seemed out of place. I knelt down, my professional curiosity kicking in. Our property sat on heavy red clay, the kind that sticks to everything when it's wet and turns to concrete when it dries. This soil was different, sandy. I could see quartz flecks glinting under the hallway light. "Where did you go shopping today?" I asked casually, not looking up from the shoes. "The mall, like always," Brenda replied from the kitchen, her voice carrying that distracted tone she used when she wasn't really paying attention. But the mall sat on the same red clay as the rest of our neighborhood. I'd done drainage work in that area. I knew the soil composition. couldn't shake the image of that sandy soil. In my workshop garage, surrounded by stacks of PVC pipes and excavation tools, I examined a small sample I discreetly collected from Brenda's shoe. Under my work light, the mineral composition was clear: sandy loam with high quartz content and distinctive feldspar crystals. 15 years of digging septic systems had given me an eye for soil types. You learn to read the earth like a book: clay content, drainage characteristics, mineral composition. This wasn't from any shopping center parking lot. The garage felt cold despite the space heater humming in the corner, and I pulled my flannel shirt tighter as I studied the sample. I photographed it with my phone, documenting what might be nothing, or everything. The soil told a story, and I was starting to realize I might not like how it ended. The next morning, Brenda emerged from our bedroom wearing a silk blouse I didn't recognize. Cream-colored, expensive-looking. The kind of thing she used to save for special occasions, back when we had special occasions. "Another shopping trip today," she announced, applying lipstick in the hallway mirror with practiced precision. "Meeting some girlfriends for lunch." I nodded, sipping my coffee from the chipped mug Emma had made me in pottery class 3 years ago. "Which girlfriends?" "You don't know them," she deflected, not meeting my eyes in the mirror. She grabbed her purse, a different one today, black leather with gold hardware. "I'll probably be late. Don't wait up." The front door closed with finality, leaving me alone with my growing unease and the lingering scent of her expensive perfume. At my job site that Thursday, I distracted while installing a drainage field for the Morrison family. The familiar rhythm of laying perforated pipes in trenches usually calmed me, but my mind kept wandering. My crew noticed my unusual quietness as we worked in the November chill. "Everything all right, boss?" asked Tommy, my longtime employee, as we positioned another section of pipe. He'd been with me for 8 years, knew my moods better than most. "Just thinking," I replied, checking the grade with my transit level. The slope had to be perfect. Too steep and you get erosion, too shallow and nothing drains properly. During lunch break, I sat in my truck cab and called Brenda's phone, straight to voicemail. Her cheerful, recorded voice felt like a stranger's. "Hi, you've reached Brenda. Leave a message and I'll get back to you." The construction site buzzed with activity around me. Tommy and the crew discussing weekend plans, the steady beep of a backing excavator, the distant sound of traffic on the county road. But I felt isolated, like I was watching my life from outside a window. The November sun felt weak, casting long shadows across the excavated earth. I pulled out my phone and looked at the photo of that soil sample again. Sandy loam with quartz flecks. I'd seen that exact composition before, but I couldn't place where. Something fundamental had shifted in my world, like when you hit bedrock during an excavation and realize you need to completely change your approach. The familiar had become foreign, and I was starting to understand that I might be digging in ground I'd never mapped before. That evening, Brenda returned home with the kind of bright energy that felt rehearsed. She kicked off her heels by the front door, different ones than she'd worn that morning. Black pumps instead of the brown flats I'd seen her lace up. "What a day," she announced, hanging her coat in the closet with theatrical flair. "You should have seen the restaurant Sarah picked. This little French place downtown with the most incredible salmon special." I looked up from the kitchen table where I'd been reviewing invoices. "Sounds nice. Which place?" "Oh, you wouldn't know it. Very upscale." She moved to the refrigerator, pulling out ingredients for dinner with practiced efficiency. The ambiance was just perfect. White tablecloths, real crystal glasses. Sarah was telling us about her husband's promotion, and Jennifer's daughter got into that private school. The details flowed like rehearsed lines. Too many specifics about the restaurant's decor, not enough about the actual conversation. I watched her hands as she chopped vegetables. No shopping bag anywhere, despite her morning claim about buying a new scarf. "Sounds like a nice day," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the knot tightening in my stomach. She smiled brightly, but something cold flickered behind her eyes. It was. Sometimes a girl just needs to get away from all this. She gestured vaguely at our kitchen, our life. The living room felt like a stage that night. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, Emma doing homework on the floor between us, Lucas playing video games in the corner. Brenda flipped through a magazine, occasionally commenting on celebrity gossip or home decor trends. I pretended to watch the news, but my mind kept circling back to those different shoes, the missing shopping bag, the way she'd said upscale like she was auditioning for a part. "Dean?" Brenda's voice cut through my thoughts. "I asked if you wanted more coffee." "No, thanks." I studied her face in the lamplight. When had she started wearing makeup to lunch with girlfriends? When had her perfume changed from the familiar floral scent to something heavier, more expensive? "You're quiet tonight," she observed, closing her magazine. "Just tired. Long day at the Morrison site." She nodded with the kind of understanding that felt practiced. "Well, I'm going to take a bath. Early morning tomorrow. Another lunch date." After she disappeared upstairs, I sat in the gathering darkness of our living room, listening to water running through the pipes I'd installed myself when we bought this house. Everything about our evening felt like performance art. Two actors who'd forgotten their lines but kept improvising anyway. The next morning, I started keeping a notebook in my truck. Nothing fancy, just a small spiral pad from the hardware store, the kind I used for job estimates. But instead of measurements and material lists, I began documenting something else entirely. Friday, November 17th. Left 11:30 a.m., claimed lunch with Sarah. Returned 4:15 p.m. with sandy soil on shoes, same composition as before. No shopping bags despite mentioning scarf purchase, different perfume, something with vanilla notes. Saturday, November 18th. Shopping downtown, 10 a.m. departure. Back by 2 p.m., no packages. Claimed stores were too crowded, but downtown was quiet when I drove through for parts. Sunday, November 19th. Church with family, normal behavior. Stayed close, held my hand during service. Almost felt like old times. The notebook pages filled with careful observations, each entry building a pattern I didn't want to see. Times, destinations, inconsistencies. I approached it like a septic installation, methodical, precise, documenting every detail because the smallest oversight could lead to system failure. My workshop became my sanctuary during those weeks. Surrounded by PVC fittings and pipe wrenches, the honest tools of my trade, I could think clearly. The familiar smell of diesel fuel from my equipment and the sharp scent of PVC cement comforted me more than our own house. Here, everything had a purpose. Every joint either sealed properly or it didn't. No gray areas, no performance, no lies. I'd sit on my workbench after dinner, updating my notes while Brenda watched television inside. Through the workshop window, I could see her silhouette on the couch, phone always within reach, always checking messages. The warm yellow light from our living room windows looked inviting from the outside, but I knew the cold reality inside. Monday, November 21st. Grocery shopping, 1 to 5 p.m. Returned with minimal groceries, claimed stores were busy, hands soft, no grocery cart wear on palms. Tuesday, November 22nd. Hair appointment, 2 to 6 p.m. Hair looked identical upon return. Expensive salon receipt in purse for $180, but no visible change. The breaking point came a week later during Emma's parent-teacher conference. We sat in those tiny plastic chairs designed for children, discussing our 14-year-old's college prep courses with Mrs. Henderson. Other parents filtered through the hallway, doctors, lawyers, business owners from the nicer part of town. "Emma's very bright," Mrs. Henderson was saying. "Her science grades are exceptional. She mentioned wanting to study environmental engineering?" She gets that from her father, Brenda said with a laugh that had sharp edges. Though Dean's just a septic guy. Not exactly cocktail party conversation. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Other families discussed their children's futures around us. SAT prep, college visits, career ambitions. Mrs. Henderson smiled politely, but I caught the subtle shift in her expression, the way she glanced at my work clothes and calloused hands. Septic systems are more complex than people think, I said quietly. Soil analysis, hydraulic engineering, environmental regulations. It's not just digging holes. Of course, Brenda said quickly, touching my arm in a gesture that felt more like damage control than affection. I just mean it's not, well, you know. I knew. I'd been knowing for 15 years of marriage. The shame wasn't new. I'd felt it at school functions, neighborhood barbecues, anywhere Brenda had to explain what her husband did for a living. But tonight, something had shifted. The familiar sting was mixed with something harder, angrier. That night I sat in my truck outside our house at 11:47 p.m., looking at the warm windows where my children did homework and watched TV. Inside, Brenda moved through our kitchen, probably making her nightly tea, checking her phone for messages that never seemed to include me. When had she started seeing me as beneath her? When had my work, honest work that kept our community healthy and functioning, become something to be embarrassed about? I thought about the Blackwood job, how that tech investor had treated me like invisible help while I crawled through his crawl space, ensuring his expensive house wouldn't flood with sewage. The dashboard clock ticked to 11:48. Through our bedroom window, I could see Brenda's shadow moving around, getting ready for bed. Tomorrow she'd probably have another lunch date, another shopping trip, another reason to come home with soil on her shoes that didn't match anywhere she claimed to be. I pulled out my notebook and wrote, "Need to identify soil composition, something familiar about those quartz flecks." The revelation hit me like a physical blow 3 days later while reviewing my recent job orders in the workshop. I've been trying to place that sandy loam soil for weeks, the distinctive composition with those quartz crystals and feldspar inclusions. My hands shook as I flipped through my work files, searching for the match that had been nagging at my subconscious. There it was. October 15th work order. Blackwood Estate, 4847 Ridgemont Trail. Septic installation completed. Soil composition, sandy loam, 12% quartz content, distinctive feldspar crystals. Nathaniel Blackwood. The tech investment portfolio manager who treated me like hired help while I installed his septic system. The man who'd made condescending comments about the working class while I crawled under his mansion, ensuring his toilets would flush properly. The same sandy soil signature I'd been finding on Brenda's designer shoes. My workshop spun around me as the pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. The expensive perfume, the secretive phone calls, the elaborate alibis for simple errands. The soil didn't lie. It told you exactly where it had been. And Brenda's shoes had been telling me a story I'd been too trusting to read. I sat there for a long time, surrounded by the tools of my trade, understanding finally why my wife kept coming home with evidence of a place she'd never admitted visiting. The irony tasted bitter. I'd installed the very septic system that was now processing the waste from my marriage's destruction. 23 miles. That's how far the Blackwood estate sat from our house, hidden behind stone gates and rolling fields of that distinctive sandy loam soil. Far enough that Brenda thought she was safe from discovery. Close enough that I could drive there in 30 minutes. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Brenda, working late tonight, don't wait up." I looked at the timestamp, 6:47 p.m. Then I looked at my work order again, remembering Blackwood's schedule. Fridays were his work-from-home days, he'd mentioned during the installation. Plenty of privacy at his rural estate. Time to start building my case. But first, I needed to see for myself. I needed to drive out to 4847 Ridgemont Trail and confirm what my professional expertise was already telling me. The soil doesn't lie, and neither would I once I had all the facts. The kitchen clock read 6:03 a.m. when I spread the work logs across our scratched oak table. Steam rose from my coffee mug, but the liquid had already gone cold. Didn't matter. Sleep wasn't coming back anyway. I pulled out the GPS printouts from my truck's tracking system, every route logged automatically for tax purposes. My calloused fingers traced the October 23rd entry, 4847 Ridgemont Trail, Blackwoods Estate. The day I'd installed his septic system, working in that distinctive sandy loam soil that stuck to everything. The soil composition was burned into my memory like a brand. 12% quartz, 8% feldspar, with that reddish clay binding that made it hell to dig through. Ancient riverbed deposits, the Geological Survey had called it, found nowhere else in the county. I stared at the route map until the lines blurred. Brenda's alibi for that same day played in my head like a broken record. Shopping downtown, honey, the usual stores. But her $1,200 Louboutin shoes, the ones she'd claimed were a birthday gift from her sister, had carried the exact mineral signature of Blackwood's remote property. The evidence doesn't lie. People do. I pushed back from the table and walked to my home office, where I kept my detailed soil composition notes. 15 years of septic installations had taught me that every property tells a story through its dirt. Clay content, percolation rates, bedrock depth. I documented everything for warranty purposes. The Blackwood file sat in my filing cabinet like a loaded gun. I pulled it out with hands that trembled slightly. Professional testing kit analysis, photographs of excavation layers, mineral composition breakdown, standard procedure for a $8,400 septic installation. The geological signature was unmistakable. Those ancient riverbed deposits with their specific mineral ratios existed in exactly one location within 50 miles. I tested soil from hundreds of properties. This combination was unique to Blackwood's estate. My phone buzzed. Text from Brenda. Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. I looked at the timestamp. 6:47 a.m. Then I looked at my work order again, remembering Blackwood's schedule. Fridays were his work-from-home days, he'd mentioned during the installation. Plenty of privacy at his rural estate. The memory hit me like a sledgehammer to the gut. Blackwood's voice during the installation, dripping with condescension. "Make sure the help doesn't track mud through the house," he told his assistant while I worked in the October heat, sweat soaking through my Carhartt shirt. Time to start building my case. I grabbed my work jacket and headed for the truck. The October morning air bit at my face as I fired up the diesel engine. If Brenda was going to lie to me, I needed more than soil samples. I needed proof that would hold up in court. The drive to Marcus Chen's office took 20 minutes through downtown traffic. I'd found his name in the yellow pages, discreet investigations, divorce specialists. The kind of ad that made my stomach turn, but here I was. His office sat above a bail bondsman's shop, which felt about right. I climbed the narrow stairs, my work boots echoing in the stairwell. The waiting room smelled like stale coffee and disappointment. "Mr. Wright?" A thin Asian man in his 50s emerged from the back office. Wire-rimmed glasses, cheap suit, the look of someone who'd seen too much. Marcus Chen. "Come on back." His office was cramped but organized. File cabinets lined one wall, a computer hummed on his desk. He gestured to a worn leather chair across from him. "So," he said, settling behind his desk, "tell me what's going on." I pulled out the soil samples, still sealed in their testing containers. "My wife's been lying about where she goes. I can prove it." Chen raised an eyebrow. "Soil samples?" "I'm a septic technician. This soil came off her shoes. Sandy loam with specific mineral composition. Only exists at one property in the county." I set the containers on his desk. "The Blackwood estate. where I installed a system 3 weeks ago. Chen leaned forward, studying the samples. And your wife was supposed to be where? Downtown shopping, but this dirt proves she was at Blackwood's place. The words tasted bitter. 23 miles outside town, on his private estate. Interesting. Chen made notes on a legal pad. But I'll need more than soil to build a case. Photos, documentation, patterns of behavior. What else have you noticed? I told him about the credit card statement, the secretive phone calls, the elaborate alibis. Chen nodded, writing everything down. My rate is $75 an hour plus expenses, he said finally. Full surveillance package runs about $2,500 for 2 weeks. That'll give us patterns, documentation, admissible evidence. $2,500, 2 months of truck payments. But what choice did I have? Do it, I said. Chen slid a contract across the desk. I'll need photos of your wife, her vehicle information, work schedule. The more details you give me, the better results I can deliver. I signed the papers with hands that felt disconnected from my body. 15 years of marriage, and it had come to hiring a stranger to follow my wife around. One more thing, Chen said as I stood to leave. Don't change your routine. Act normal. If she's smart, she'll notice any changes in your behavior. Act normal. Like I hadn't just discovered my wife was a liar. The drive home felt endless. I kept checking my mirrors, wondering if Chen was already following someone else's cheating spouse. The whole business felt dirty, but so did sleeping next to someone who looked me in the eye and lied every day. I pulled into my driveway at 11:30 a.m. Brenda's car was gone, probably at her book club that never seemed to involve any actual books. I'd stopped asking about her meetings months ago, tired of the vague answers. The house felt different now, like evidence of deception lurked in every corner. I walked through the kitchen where we'd shared coffee that morning, her voice bright and cheerful as she kissed me goodbye. Have a good day, honey. How long had she been practicing that performance? My phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Wright? This is Chen. Quick question. Does your wife drive a white Honda Accord? License plate starting with BYG. My stomach dropped. Yeah, why? Just confirming. I'm watching her right now. She's not at any book club. Where is she? Fairmont Grand Hotel, downtown. She went straight to the elevator with a tall man in an expensive suit. Dark hair, maybe 45. They looked familiar with each other. The Fairmont Grand, $300 a night rooms, way above our budget. Get photos, I said. Already on it. I'll have a full report by end of day. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the kitchen window. 15 years, 3 kids, a mortgage, a business I'd built from nothing. All of it balanced on the lie of a faithful wife. The soil samples had been just the beginning. At 4 p.m., I heard Brenda's car in the driveway. I was in my workshop, pretending to organize tools while my mind raced. The garage door opened, and her heels clicked across the concrete floor. Hey, honey, she called out, her voice bright and cheerful. How was your day? I turned around, studying her face like I was seeing it for the first time. Perfect makeup, not a hair out of place. She carried shopping bags from 3 downtown stores, Nordstrom, Macy's, some boutique I'd never heard of. Good, I managed. Busy. You? She set down the bags and walked over to kiss my cheek. Her perfume smelled expensive, different from what she usually wore. Oh, you know, book club ran long, then I did some shopping, found the most adorable dress. She pulled out a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than I made in a week. What do you think? Nice, I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. Book club discuss anything interesting? The usual. Sarah's going through her divorce. Monica's kids are driving her crazy. She laughed, the sound hollow to my ears. Small-town drama, you know how it is. Every word could be true. Her smile seemed genuine, her voice warm. She showed me the other items she'd bought: a silk scarf, expensive earrings, a purse that cost more than most people's car payments. She talked about lunch with girlfriends, complained about downtown traffic, mentioned seeing Mrs. Henderson at the grocery store. The performance was flawless. Either she was an incredible actress, or she genuinely believed her own lies. Both possibilities terrified me. "I'm going to call Rebecca," I said, needing space to think. "Haven't talked to my sister in a while." "Tell her I said hi," Brenda replied, already heading inside with her bags. I walked to the backyard, pulling out my phone. Rebecca answered on the second ring. "Dean, everything okay? You sound strange." "I need to ask you something," I said, walking further from the house. "And I need you to be honest with me. Have you noticed anything different about Brenda lately?" The pause that followed spoke volumes. "Dean," Rebecca's voice was careful. "I didn't want to say anything, but yes, she's been different. More secretive. Distant. She used to call me all the time. Now it's like she's avoiding family gatherings." The confirmation hit like a physical blow. My own sister had seen the changes I'd been too blind to recognize. "How long?" I asked. "Maybe 6 months? She just seems, I don't know, like she's somewhere else, even when she's right there. And she's been asking weird questions about money, about what happens to assets in divorces. I thought maybe you two were having problems." "We were. I just hadn't known it." "Dean, what's going on?" "I'll call you back," I said, hanging up before she could ask more questions. That evening, I watched Brenda interact with our kids during dinner. She helped Sophia with her math homework, laughed at Lucas's jokes about his science teacher, discussed Emma's upcoming school project with genuine interest. She was the same loving mother she'd always been. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. How could someone compartmentalize betrayal so completely? How could she sit at our dinner table, help our children, kiss me goodnight, then wake up and lie to my face the next morning? Sophia, our youngest, shared Brenda's dark eyes and delicate features. As I watched them together, a terrible question began forming in my mind, one I wasn't ready to confront. Not yet. Some evidence cut too deep to process immediately. After the kids went to bed, I told Brenda I needed to check on a job site. She barely looked up from her laptop. "Don't be too late," she said. "I'm thinking about going to bed early." I drove past the Blackwood estate at 9 p.m., my truck's headlights cutting through the rural darkness. The property sat behind electronic gates, security lights illuminating the circular driveway where I'd parked my work truck 3 weeks ago. I remembered Blackwood's voice during the installation, dripping with condescension as he spoke to his assistant. "Make sure the help doesn't track mud through the house." The help. That's all I was to him. A working man who fixed his problems and disappeared. Now I wondered if he laughed about this, if he found some twisted pleasure in the fact that the septic guy who'd crawled through his dirt was being cuckolded by the very woman warming his bed. The humiliation burned worse than the betrayal. I'd been played by people who thought they were better than me. I drove home through empty country roads, my mind spinning with rage and hurt. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed Brenda's laptop still open on the kitchen counter. Unusual, since she was normally protective of her privacy. The screen showed a travel website with luxury hotel bookings. My heart pounded as I realized she'd left it open deliberately. Either she was becoming careless, or she wanted me to find something. Before I could investigate further, Brenda appeared in the doorway wearing a silk nightgown I'd never seen before. "Oh, you're back," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "I was just planning a surprise weekend for us. Thought we could get away, just the two of us." She moved to close the laptop, but not before I caught a glimpse of the booking details. Fairmont Grand Hotel, the same place Chen had seen her today. "Sounds nice," I managed. "I thought so too. She studied my face carefully. "You look tired, honey. Everything okay?" She knew. Somehow she knew I was suspicious. And now she was testing me, seeing how much I'd figured out. "Just a long day," I said. "Well, get some rest. Tomorrow's Saturday. We can sleep in." I lay awake at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling while Brenda slept peacefully beside me. Her breathing was even, untroubled. No guilt disturbing her dreams. The soil evidence was irrefutable, but I realized my mistake. I've been investigating like a scientist when I should have been thinking like a husband. Chen would get me the full picture. Photos, documentation, patterns that would hold up in court. The thought of paying a stranger to document my wife's betrayal felt like admitting defeat. But I was in over my head. Some jobs require professional help, even for a man who's built everything himself. My phone buzzed with a text from Chen. "Got what you need. Meet tomorrow 9 a.m. Bring coffee. You'll need it." The kitchen table looked like a crime scene lab at 7:15 a.m. on October 24th. I'd arranged the geological survey maps in perfect alignment, soil sample containers in precise rows according to mineral density. The sandy loam from Brenda's shoes sat in a labeled vial, Sample A, November 15th, 2023, right next to the reference samples I'd collected from the Blackwood estate. My hands moved with the same methodical precision I used when calibrating septic flow rates. The coffee maker gurgled in the background, filling the kitchen with that bitter morning smell. But underneath it, I caught something else. The faint scent of expensive perfume lingering from last night. Brenda's signature fragrance, the one that cost more than most people's weekly groceries. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, measured, careful. She was trying not to wake the kids. The floorboards creaked in that familiar pattern. 3rd step, 7th step, then the loose board at the bottom. 15 years in this house, I knew every sound. She appeared in the doorway wearing her silk robe, the one she'd bought during one of her shopping trips to the city. Her blonde hair was perfectly arranged despite the early hour. Brenda never let anyone see her looking less than immaculate. But when her eyes landed on my display, her face went pale. "What is all this?" Her voice came out tight, controlled. The same tone she used when the neighbors got too close to topics she didn't want to discuss. I didn't look up from my work. My hands continued arranging the evidence with technical precision, each container placed exactly 2 inches apart. "Soil analysis," I said, my voice carrying the same detached professionalism I used when explaining drainage systems to skeptical clients. 12% quartz, 8% feldspar. Very specific composition. She moved closer, her bare feet silent on the tile floor. I could feel her tension radiating across the kitchen like heat from an oven. The morning light streaming through the window caught the mineral flecks in both samples, making them sparkle identically. "I don't understand what you're trying to prove," she said, but her voice wavered. The confident mask was already starting to slip. I finally looked up at her. Her blue eyes, the ones that used to make me forget my own name, now looked calculating, searching for an escape route. "I'm not trying to prove anything, Brenda. I'm documenting facts." I pointed to the first sample container with the methodical patience of a teacher explaining a lesson to a slow student. "This is from your Louboutin shoes, collected November 15th. My finger moved to the second container. "This is from the Blackwood property where I installed the septic system in October." Brenda sat down heavily in the chair across from me, her designer purse sliding off her shoulder and hitting the floor with a muffled thud. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden silence. I watched her process the implications, saw the exact moment she understood what I was showing her. "The geological signatures are identical," I continued, my voice remaining clinical. "This soil exists in only one location within 50 miles of here. The mineral composition is like a fingerprint, unique to that specific bedrock formation." She was fidgeting with her wedding ring now, twisting it around her finger. The same nervous habit she developed during our financial discussions, when the credit card bills started climbing beyond our means. I unfolded the property survey map with deliberate slowness, the paper crinkling in the quiet kitchen. My finger found the remote location of the Blackwood estate, isolated among 47 acres of rolling hills and old-growth timber. "You told me you were shopping downtown that day," I said, tracing the 23-mile distance from town to the estate with my index finger. "But this soil tells a different story." Brenda's breathing became shallow, rapid. Her hands moved from the wedding ring to her throat, then back to the ring. The kitchen felt smaller suddenly, the walls closing in around us like the walls of a septic tank during a difficult installation. "Maybe I walked through a construction site," she offered weakly. "There's always work being done somewhere in town." I shook my head, pulling out my phone. The screen showed the GPS tracking data I'd been analyzing for weeks. 47 visits to this exact location over 18 months. Your phone tracked every trip, every route, every duration. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, mathematical. I watched Brenda's face crumble as the weight of the data hit her. Her carefully constructed alibis meant nothing against GPS coordinates and geological analysis. "The longest visit was 6 hours and 43 minutes, I continued, scrolling through the data. "Last Tuesday, while I was installing a system in Millerville." "You told me you were getting your hair done." Brenda suddenly stood, knocking over her chair. The wooden legs scraped against the tile with a harsh, grating sound that made us both wince. "You've been tracking me? Spying on me like some kind of stalker?" Her voice rose to a shout, desperation making her aggressive. The silk robe billowed around her as she paced to the window, then back to the table. I remained seated, calm, my voice steady as bedrock. "I've been protecting my family's future," I said, sliding a stack of bank statements toward her. "These show monthly transfers of $2,300 to an account I've never seen, every month since April 2016. The papers scattered slightly as they hit the table's edge. Brenda's eyes darted between the evidence and the door, like a trapped animal looking for escape routes. Her breathing was getting faster, more panicked. "This is harassment," she snapped, pointing at the documents. "You can't just—" "I can prove everything," I interrupted quietly. The finality in my voice cut through her protests like a backhoe through clay. "Every transaction, every location, every lie." The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a garbage truck working its way through our neighborhood. Normal morning sounds in a house where nothing would ever be normal again. Brenda's phone buzzed against the counter where she'd left it charging. She grabbed it desperately, her fingers shaking as she tried to type a message. I watched her, recognizing the panic of someone calling for backup, reaching out to the person who'd helped create this mess. "Texting Nathaniel?" I asked quietly. The name hit Brenda like a physical blow. She dropped the phone, and I heard the screen crack as it hit the tile floor. The sound was sharp, final, like something breaking that could never be fixed. The kitchen filled with the sound of her ragged breathing. Her face had gone white, all the carefully applied makeup suddenly looking garish against her pale skin. "How do you—" she started, then stopped, realizing the depth of my knowledge. The careful investigation, the methodical documentation. She was beginning to understand that I knew everything. I reached into my shirt pocket and pulled out the final piece of evidence. The envelope was still sealed, the lab's logo visible in the corner. I placed it on the table between us with the same careful precision I'd used for everything else. "Paternity test report," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "For Sophia." Brenda's eyes locked onto the envelope like it was a snake coiled to strike. Her hands moved to her throat, fingers pressing against her pulse point. "Nathaniel Blackwood is her biological father." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Brenda collapsed back into her chair, all fight leaving her body. Her silk robe pooled around her like spilled water, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked small, defeated. The soil doesn't lie, Brenda, and neither does DNA. The silence that followed felt heavier than wet concrete. I stared at the paternity report, the clinical percentages swimming before my eyes. 99.7% probability. 7 years. 7 years I'd been reading bedtime stories to another man's daughter, teaching her to ride a bike, worrying about her scraped knees. Brenda's quiet sobbing filled the kitchen like water dripping from a broken pipe. Each sob reminded me of everything I'd lost. Not just my wife, but the family I thought we'd built together. The coffee maker gurgled, finishing its cycle into a pot nobody would drink from. 7 years, I whispered, my voice cracking for the first time since this nightmare began. 7 years I've been raising his child. Brenda wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving dark streaks of mascara across her cheek. Her silk robe had fallen open slightly, revealing the expensive lingerie underneath, probably bought with our joint account for him. Dean, I can explain. No more lies. The words came out harder than I intended. I gathered the evidence with hands that had started trembling. The methodical technician was cracking, replaced by something raw and broken. The soil doesn't lie. DNA doesn't lie. Only you do. But something shifted in Brenda's expression as I spoke. The defeat melted away, replaced by something colder. She straightened in her chair, shoulders squaring like she was preparing for battle. You want the truth? Her voice grew stronger, more defiant. Fine. Yes, I've been seeing Nathaniel. Yes, Sophia is his daughter. And yes, I've been planning to leave you for months. Each admission hit like a sledgehammer to the chest. I stopped gathering papers, my hands frozen over the soil samples. The kitchen suddenly felt too bright, too exposed, like standing naked under stadium lights. You think your little investigation changes anything? Brenda continued, her voice gaining momentum. Nathaniel has lawyers, Dean. Real lawyers, not some septic worker playing detective with dirt samples. The contempt in her voice cut deeper than any physical blow. This wasn't just an affair. This was a calculated escape plan, and I'd been the mark all along. You've been using our joint account to fund your exit strategy, I said quietly. My voice had gone deadly calm, the way it did when I was about to deliver bad news to a client about their failed system. Brenda nodded, no longer bothering to hide her intentions. Nathaniel's worth $8.7 million. He can give me the life I deserve, not this. She gestured around our modest kitchen with disgust, her wedding ring catching the morning light. The air felt thick with years of resentment finally exposed. I stood slowly, my work-calloused hands gripping the table edge hard enough to leave marks in the wood. The life you deserve, I repeated, the words bitter as motor oil in my mouth. Built on my sweat and lies. Brenda pulled out her cracked phone, frantically trying to swipe the damaged screen. Nathaniel will protect me from whatever pathetic revenge you're planning. But the display remained black, the spider web of cracks reflecting the kitchen lights like broken promises. I watched her panic with cold satisfaction. Your boyfriend's lawyers can't change soil composition or DNA evidence. I began methodically packing the samples back into their containers, each movement precise and final. 23 years in this business, Brenda. I know how to document evidence that holds up in court. The kitchen felt like a crime scene being processed. Brenda realized her lifeline was cut, her backup plan crumbling like poorly compacted soil. You don't understand what you're dealing with, she said desperately, her voice climbing toward hysteria. Nathaniel has connections, influence. He'll destroy you. I sealed the last evidence container with professional precision, each movement deliberate and final. My smile felt arctic. Let him try. I built Wright Septic Solutions from nothing, I continued, my voice carrying years of suppressed hurt. Worked 18-hour days in mud and shit to give you everything you wanted. Designer shoes, expensive dinners, that Mercedes you insisted we couldn't afford. Brenda watched me pack away her secrets, her face pale with the realization that her comfortable lies were over. The kitchen felt like a courtroom where the verdict had been read. "You chose a rich man's money over our family," I said, sealing the final container. "Now you'll face the consequences." "The soil doesn't lie, Brenda, and neither does DNA. But you've been lying for 7 years. The finality in my tone made her shiver. She was no longer the one in control, no longer the sophisticated woman planning her elegant escape. She was just another cheating wife caught in her own web of deception. And I was done being her fool. The conference room smelled like industrial disinfectant and stale coffee. I sat across from my attorney, Sarah Chen, watching her arrange manila folders with the same precision I used laying septic lines. The soil analysis report lay open between us. 12% quartz, 8% feldspar, geological fingerprint as unique as DNA. "This is ironclad," Sarah said, tapping the lab results with her pen. "Adultery proven by scientific evidence. I've never seen documentation this thorough." My calloused hands remained steady on the polished table as I signed the divorce papers. Each signature felt like sealing a pipe joint, permanent, unbreakable. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows on documents that would destroy Brenda's carefully constructed lies. "The soil composition analysis alone would convince any judge," Sarah continued, flipping through photographs of Brenda's designer shoes. "But combined with the GPS data, hotel receipts, and DNA evidence, Dean, your septic business expertise has become your legal ammunition." I nodded, watching ink dry on papers that would split our lives in half. "The ground doesn't lie, neither does proper documentation. 23 years in this business taught me that evidence speaks louder than excuses." Brenda was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The courthouse hallway echoed with clicking heels as Brenda arrived with her attorney, a nervous-looking man in an expensive suit. I watched from the wooden bench as she scanned the room, searching for Nathaniel Blackwood, who never showed. "He's not coming," I told her quietly when she approached. Her face crumbled like unstable soil after heavy rain. The wealthy man wouldn't risk his reputation in court, wouldn't stand beside her when the cameras rolled. The marble floors amplified every whisper, every nervous shuffle of feet. "Dean, please," she started, but her lawyer whispered urgently in her ear about settlement options. I pulled out my briefcase, setting it on the bench between us. "You see this? 47 documented visits to the Blackwood estate, hotel receipts totaling $31,200. And this." I held up a vial of sandy loam soil. "This is from your Louboutin shoes. 12% quartz content, specific to one location in this county." Brenda's attorney fumbled through his papers, but my evidence was too strong. The soil samples sat in labeled vials, scientific proof of her betrayal gleaming under courthouse lights. "The hearing starts in 10 minutes, I said, standing. "Your boyfriend should have taught you something about geology before you started lying." In the judge's chambers, I presented my case with methodical precision. Each piece of evidence built like layers of earth. GPS data showing her phone at Blackwood's property, hotel receipts for the Fairmont Grand's luxury suite, soil composition charts that mapped her deception. 47 documented visits to the Blackwood estate, I stated, voice steady as bedrock. Each one during my scheduled work hours when she claimed to be shopping downtown. Judge Morrison examined the geological analysis with growing amazement. "Mr. Wright, this is remarkable documentation. You've essentially created a scientific timeline of adultery." Brenda's attorney fumbled through weak denials while she sat frozen, watching 8 years of marriage dissolve under scientific scrutiny. The room felt airless, heavy with the weight of absolute proof. "Your Honor," I continued, "I've spent 23 years reading soil composition, This sandy loam contains mineral signatures found in only one location, the Blackwood property at 4847 Ridgemont Trail. My wife's shoes carried this evidence home 47 times. The judge nodded slowly. And the DNA results? Sophia Wright is not my biological daughter. The paternity test confirms Nathaniel Blackwood as the father. My voice remained steady, but inside, the words cut like broken glass. Brenda finally spoke, her voice cracking. "Dean, I never meant for it to go this far." "You meant every lie," I replied. "Every hotel receipt, every secret phone call. The soil doesn't lie, Brenda, and neither does DNA." The room fell silent except for the scratch of the court reporter's pen. My blue-collar expertise had become unassailable truth. The gavel fell with finality. Divorce granted. Adultery proven beyond doubt. I retained full ownership of Wright Septic Solutions, the house, and primary custody of Emma and Lucas. Brenda got her secret credit card debt and nothing more. She stumbled from the courtroom, designer shoes clicking frantically on marble as reporters waited outside. Word had spread through town about the septic man who used soil science to catch his cheating wife. I felt the weight lift from my shoulders like soil settling after rain. My sister Rebecca squeezed my arm in the hallway. "You did it," she whispered. 23 years of expertise finally got the respect it deserved. The courthouse air tasted different now, clean, honest, free of deception. I walked past the reporters without comment, my work boots steady on the marble steps. Outside, my truck waited in the parking lot, Wright Septic Solutions painted on the side in bold letters. No longer a symbol of shame in Brenda's eyes, but proof of competence and integrity. I returned to my workshop that evening, running my hands over familiar tools and soil testing equipment. The space felt larger somehow, no longer shadowed by lies and whispered phone calls. The pH meter that caught Brenda's deception sat on the workbench, its digital display dark but ready. I'd used it to test soil samples for 15 years, never knowing it would one day test the foundation of my marriage. I updated my client database, removing Nathaniel Blackwood's information with cold satisfaction. His septic system worked perfectly, unlike his character. The phone rang as I finished. Wright Septic Solutions. "Dean, this is Tom Bradley out on County Road 47. Heard about your court case today. Hell of a thing using soil science like that. Listen, I need a new septic system installed. You available next week?" "I'll be there Monday morning," I said. "And Tom?" "Thanks." My business reputation remained intact while Brenda's world crumbled. The workshop smelled of honest work and diesel fuel, familiar scents that meant home. Outside, my truck sat ready for the next job, tools organized and ready. At the bank the next morning, I closed the joint accounts, transferring the remaining $23,400 to my business account. The manager, a man who'd known me for 15 years, treated me with new respect. "Impressive case, Dean," he said, shaking my hand across his desk. "Word's already spreading about how you built that evidence. Methodical as hell." I signed papers with steady hands, each signature erasing another connection to my former life. The bank's air conditioning hummed quietly, a mundane soundtrack to my financial liberation. "The soil analysis equipment paid for itself," I told him. "Sometimes the tools that find problems can solve them too." He laughed, stamping the final document. "Your business account's looking healthy. Ready to rebuild?" I looked out the window at my truck parked on Main Street. Wright Septic Solutions. Built from nothing. Tested by betrayal. Proven unbreakable. "Been rebuilding all my life," I said. "This time I'm building on solid ground." The next morning I drove Emma and Lucas to school in comfortable silence. No more tiptoeing around Brenda's moods or explaining away her sudden departures. Just the radio playing soft country music and my kids finishing homework in the passenger seats. "Dad?" Emma looked up from her math textbook. Are you okay? Like, really okay? I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. 14 years old, already learning that adults don't always tell the truth about their feelings. I'm getting there, sweetheart. Some days are harder than others. Mom called me last night, she said quietly. She wanted to explain things. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. What did you tell her? That I already understood. You showed us the evidence, remember? The soil samples and everything. Emma closed her textbook. She kept saying it was complicated, but it seemed pretty simple to me. Lucas nodded from the front seat. Like when Tommy Peterson cheated on his science test. He had all these excuses, but he still copied the answers. I pulled into the school parking lot, watching other parents drop off their kids. Normal families dealing with normal problems. Your mom made choices, I said carefully. Now we all have to live with the consequences. Will we see her again? Lucas asked. When you want to. That's up to you. Emma gathered her backpack. I want to understand the soil testing stuff better. The way you explained it in court was really cool. I smiled, feeling something warm settle in my chest. I'll teach you this weekend. Might be useful for your science fair project. They climbed out, waving as they walked toward the school building. Emma's confidence reminded me of myself at that age, curious about how things worked, eager to understand the technical details others ignored. My phone buzzed as I drove toward the shop. Unknown number, but the message made me pull over. Mr. Wright, this is Patricia Valdez from Harrison Industries. Heard about your recent court case and the geological expertise you demonstrated. We have a major commercial project that requires someone with your attention to detail. Are you available for a consultation this week? Patricia. I stared at the screen, reading the message twice. Harrison Industries, Nathaniel Blackwood's biggest competitor in the regional development market. The irony hit me like a physical weight. I typed back, available Tuesday morning. What's the scope? The response came quickly. 12-building commercial complex, challenging soil conditions. We need someone who gets it right the first time. I set the phone down, watching traffic flow past my parked truck. 6 months ago, Nathaniel Blackwood had dismissed me as the help while I installed his septic system. Now his competitor wanted my expertise for their flagship project. The workshop waited, tools organized and ready, but this felt bigger than another installation job. This felt like validation. Tuesday morning, I stood in Harrison Industries conference room, 20 floors above downtown. My soil analysis portfolio sat open on the polished table, technical diagrams spread between coffee cups and legal pads. Patricia Valdez, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, studied my geological survey maps. The previous contractor said the soil conditions were impossible. Too much clay, bedrock too shallow. They wanted to bring in engineered fill, raise the whole site by 6 feet. Expensive solution, I said, pointing to my percolation test results. But not necessary. The clay content is manageable with proper drainage design. You work with the soil, not against it. The CEO, a man named Harrison who'd built his company from nothing like I had, leaned forward. Explain that. I pulled out my core samples, each one labeled and documented. Clay holds water, but it also provides stability. The trick is controlling the water flow without compromising the foundation. Stepped drainage system, gravel beds at specific intervals, proper slope calculations. How long would that take? Patricia asked. 3 weeks for the full installation, but it'll last 50 years without major maintenance. I traced the drainage pattern on my blueprint. The other contractor's solution would need replacement in 15. Harrison nodded slowly. We've heard about your attention to detail. The Blackwood case made quite an impression. I kept my expression neutral. I apply the same standards to every job. The soil doesn't care about politics or personalities. It only responds to proper engineering. Patricia smiled. That's exactly what we need. Someone who follows the science, not the shortcuts. The contract they offered was worth more than my annual revenue. 12 buildings, each requiring custom septic solutions, plus ongoing maintenance agreements. My hands stayed steady as I reviewed the terms, but inside, something fundamental had shifted. One question, Harrison said as we shook hands. Why didn't Blackwood Development keep you for their projects? I looked out the window at the city sprawling below, thinking of sandy loam soil and designer shoes. Professional differences, I said. He preferred a different kind of service. Back in my workshop that evening, I filed the Harrison contract next to the soil analysis reports that had changed everything. The cabinet drawer closed with a satisfying click, sealing away one chapter while opening another. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Brenda. I deleted them without listening. The workshop smelled of diesel fuel and honest work, familiar scents that meant home. Outside, my truck sat ready for tomorrow's jobs, tools organized and inventory complete. Wright Septic Solutions, built from nothing, tested by betrayal, proven unbreakable. I updated my client database, adding Harrison Industries to the active contracts list. 12 buildings, 3 years of guaranteed work, enough revenue to expand the business and hire additional crew. The irony wasn't lost on me. Nathaniel Blackwood's competitor now trusted me with their most important project. My expertise, once dismissed by a man who saw me as the help, had become my greatest asset. 6 months later, I watched my crew install the final drainage system at Harrison Industries' flagship building. Emma worked beside me after school, recording percolation rates and soil composition data in her careful handwriting. The clay content here is 38%, she said, checking her calculations. That's why we needed the deeper gravel beds, right? Exactly. I marked the completed section on my blueprint. High clay content means slower drainage, but better stability. You design the system to work with what the soil gives you. She nodded, understanding the principle that had taken me years to master. Like the evidence you used in court, you worked with what Mom gave you. I looked at my daughter, seeing myself in her methodical approach to problems. The truth has its own structure, Em. You just have to know how to read it. The sun set over the construction site, painting the completed buildings in golden light. My reputation had spread beyond the local area, bringing contracts from 3 counties. The Harrison project alone would fund Emma's college education and secure the business for years. As we packed up the equipment, my phone buzzed with another message. Another potential client, another chance to prove that competence trumps condescension every time. I looked back at the completed installation, pipes running true and drainage flowing perfectly. The soil here would tell its story for decades, layers of honest work and proper engineering, built to last. Emma climbed into the truck beside me, her notebook filled with technical observations and careful measurements. Dad, I think I want to study geology in college. I started the engine, watching the Harrison Industries sign reflect in my mirrors. The earth doesn't lie, sweetheart. It tells you exactly where you've been and where you're going. We drove home through familiar streets, past the courthouse where I'd presented my evidence, past the bank where I'd closed the joint accounts. The workshop waited, tools ready for tomorrow's challenges. Wright Septic Solutions had survived betrayal and emerged stronger, not because of revenge or anger, but because good